1975 was a year when progressive rock really reached for the stars. From Pink Floyd's shimmering brilliance to Camel's cinematic storytelling and Klaus Schulze's cosmic soundscapes. This was a year that proved prog could be poetic, powerful, and sometimes downright otherworldly. Let's rewind the clock and dive into 12 essential albums that defined the sound of 1975, shall we? The mid-70s were a fascinating time for music. Glam rock was fading, punk was still in the shadows, and the rock giants were chasing bigger ideas, bigger sounds, and bigger studios. Progressive rock wasn't just music, it was an art. Albums weren't singles collections, they were journeys. Record labels like Virgin, Charisma, and Harvest were giving artists the creative freedom to experiment with time signatures, orchestrations, and concept storytelling. Critic Chris Welsh once wrote, "Prog in 1975 was like a galaxy expanding, full of stars, each shining in its own strange, beautiful light." So let's take a guided tour through 12 of those stars, 12 albums that define the progressive rock universe in this year. I'm starting with Manfred Mann's Earth Band, who were never really afraid to mix rock with experimentation. In 1975, Nightingales and Bombers pushed that idea to new heights. This album fused prog with jazz fusion, giving us a sound that was really intricate but still powerful. The critics loved its adventurous spirit. Tracks like Blinded by the Light and Spirits in the Night hinted at the group unafraid to bend genres. Rumour has it that the title was inspired by real World War II bomber communications accidentally picked up during a live field recording of Nightingales, blending nature, history, and music into one surreal concept. Melody Maker put it at the time, Manfred Mann's Earth Band are explorers, and this album is their map. In Hatfield in the North's The Rotters Club is part jazz, word shock, part surrealist dream. The musicianship is staggering. Complex time changes, witty lyrics, and a breezy British charm. Songs like Mumps and Share It show off both humour and technical brilliance. Keyboardist Dave Stewart described their process. "We'd start with a joke and somehow it would become a 10-minute composition." The album wasn't a massive seller, but its influence was enormous, inspiring everyone from National Health to later art rock acts like XTC. Now, if Pink Floyd were exploring inner space, Klaus Schulze was heading straight into the cosmos. In Timewind, the former Tangerine Dream member crafted long meditative electronic pieces that seemed to breathe, music that was less about riffs and more about atmosphere. Tracks like Beirut Return and Warmfried 1883 are hypnotic synth odysseys. Schulze reportedly recorded sections outdoors to capture natural ambience, letting the wind and night sounds shade the mix. Now, critics really divided at first, but Timewind would go on to win the Grand Prix de Disque in France. Decades later, it's recognised as one of the electronic music's sacred texts. And before 2112 made them prog heroes, Rush stumbled boldly into Unknown with Caress of Steel. This was probably their first true progressive concept album, featuring epics like The Necromancer and the six-part suite The Fountain of Lamneth. Now, at the time, critics just simply didn't get it. Rolling Stone called it overambitious. But the band jokingly referred to it as their Down the Tubes tour. But fans later embraced it as a hidden gem. Geddy Lee recalled, "We nearly lost our label over the album, but we learned who we were making music for, us." Caress of Steel might have flopped commercially, but it lit the creative fire that made 2112 possible. Now, in an era obsessed with space, Nektar turned their gaze to Earth. Recycled was an environmental concept album, a warning about pollution in technology long before it was fashionable. Wrapped in lush, symphonic prog textures, it was both cautionary and grand. Songs like Automation Horoscope and Recycled combine futuristic sounds with emotional powers. There's a rumour that the band used salvaged tape reels and analog scraps, literally recycling sound. Whether true or not, it really does fit the album's ethos perfectly. Again, it didn't top the charts, but Recycle became a cult favourite, a prophecy of the modern world. Now, when Yes took a short break, bassist Chris Squire dove out into his own masterpiece, Fish Out of Water. Released in November 1975, it reached number 25 in the UK and 69 in the US. Quite impressive for a solo bassist project at the time. From that triumphant hold out your hand to the majestic silently falling, Squire brought orchestral flair to rock. He's quoted as saying once, "I wanted to make something that sounded like Yes, but with my fingerprints all over it." The fans and the critics agreed it was elegant, inventive, and deeply melodic. Now, even today, it's a must listen for Yes devotees. Genesis guitarist Steve Hackett launched his solo career in 1975 with Voyage of the Acolyte, and Prog fans rejoiced. The album feels like a lost Genesis record, full of rich textures, fantasy themes, and adventurous instrumentation. Ace of Wands explodes with virtuosic energy, whilst Shadow of the Hierophant shows Hackett's sensitivity and ambition. He later admitted, "I really needed to step outside Genesis to find my own voice. And we found it here, loud and clear." Many fans still consider this one of the best solo albums ever released by a prog musician. Now, after a 4-year hiatus, the Graaf Generator returned darker and more intense than ever with Godbluff. This wasn't symphonic or pretty. It was raw, theatrical and brooding. Peter Hamill's vocals on Sleepwalkers and Arrow cut through like a Shakespearean cry. The production was really stripped back, capturing the band's live ferocity. Hamill said at the time, "We wanted to sound like we were playing at the end of the world." It was commercially modest, but artistically towering. And Godbluff became the cornerstone of art rock intensity. Frank Zappa's 1975 opus, One Size Fits All, is where his avant-garde genius met progressive rock head-on. Featuring dazzling performances from the Mothers, it fused jazz, rock, and quite absurdist humour. Incoherence is often hailed as one of Zappa's finest compositions. Critics raved about its precision and wit. Zappa, ever the perfectionist, reportedly spent hours editing tiny details most listeners would never notice. He once quipped, "Music is the best, and this album proves it." One Size Fits All charted well and remains a top-tier entry in the Zappa catalogue. Complex, clever, and endlessly replayable. Gentle Giant's Freehand was the perfect balancing act. Complex, but catchy. Cerebral, yet emotional. Songs like Just the Same and On Reflection show how musical acrobatics could still groove. The album hit the US Billboard Top 50, their highest chart position, proving Prog could still sell. Frontman Derek Shawman reflected, "Well, we finally figured out how to be complicated and fun at the same time." It's still one of the most beloved albums, both a fan favourite and a critical high point. Now, if you could paint music, it might sound like Camel's The Snow Goose. This entirely instrumental concept album was based on Paul Gallico's novella, telling the story through melody alone. Tracks like Rioter soar with emotion, proving that words aren't always necessary. Critics praised its elegance, and NE called it a story told through sound, as moving as any lyric. The album reached the UK top 30 and became a staple for fans of melodic, cinematic prog. And at number 1, we have an album that really needs no introduction whatsoever. Released in September 1975, well, Wish You Was Here wasn't just a record, it was a requiem for lost innocence. With Shine On You Crazy Diamond as its spine and Have a Cigar biting the hand that fed them, Floyd captured alienation, fame, and loss with stunning beauty. During sessions, former member Syd Barrett famously wandered into the studio unrecognisable, the moment that inspired tears and legend alike. David Gilmour later said, "That album is Syd's ghost. He's there in every note." Selling millions worldwide, Wish You Were Here stands as a timeless statement, that crown jewel of 1975's progressive rock universe. So this was a year when progressive rock dared to dream bigger, play wilder, and think deeper. From Klaus Schulze's cosmic synths to Camel's tender melodies and Floyd's emotional masterpieces, this was purely the golden age of musical imagination. Now, if you love this journey through prog history, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this one, and tell us in your comments what was your favourite prog album of 1975. Until next time, keep listening, keep exploring, and remember, in the world of prog, that journey never really ends.